January 2026, the Persian Gulf. The board is set, the pieces are moving. If you listen to the press briefings from the Pentagon, the United States has already achieved strategic dominance. They point to the Northern Arabian Sea. They show you the USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN-77, the Scalpel, the carrier equipped with the F-35C Lightning II. They tell you that fifth-generation stealth has locked down the airspace. Then, they point to the ground. They show you Operation Agile Spartan. The United States Air Force has deployed the 494th Fighter Squadron to the region, the F-15E Strike Eagles, the heavy hitters. The trucks carrying 23,000 pounds of ordnance each. On paper, the equation looks balanced. You have the invisible ghost in the air. You have the brute force on the ground. The media calls this a perfect deterrent. But here at Navy Decoded, we do not look at press releases. We look at the math. And when you run the logistics calculus on this perfect deterrent, it collapses. There is a fatal flaw in this formation, a gaping hole in the sustainment logic that no one is talking about. Look at the F-15E. It is the king of the sky. Yes, but it is a slave to the ground. It requires a fixed runway. It requires concrete infrastructure in Qatar or the UAE. In 2026, against an adversary like Iran, a fixed runway is not an asset, it is a target. Iranian ballistic missile doctrine is built entirely around runway denial. If the conflict goes kinetic, those airbases are erased in the first 10 minutes. If the runway is gone, the F-15E is nothing more than a museum exhibit. Now look at the Lincoln. It survives because it moves, but it fights with the F-35C to maintain stealth, to be the scalpel. The F-35 must carry its weapons internally. Physics dictates geometry. The internal bays are small. They cannot carry the volume of fire required to dismantle a nation-state's infrastructure. The Lincoln is excellent for the day one strike, but what happens on day 7? What happens when the war turns into a grinding attrition fight? The Lincoln runs out of punch. The Air Force runs out of runways. The United States runs out of options. To solve this equation, we don't need another miracle jet. We need a ghost from the Atlantic. Right now, steaming east from Norfolk is the variable X. The USS George H.W. Bush, CVN-77. The Pentagon has not officially confirmed it is joining the Lincoln. They call it routine training. Do not believe the handshake. The math demands this ship's presence. It is the inevitable solution to the logistics gap. But this ship brings something that the Lincoln does not. It brings a soul. This ship carries the name of the only president who was shot down in combat and survived to lead the nation. It carries the ghost of a 20-year-old pilot drifting in the Pacific Ocean. 1944. Bleeding, but unbroken, refusing to surrender to the sea. That is the DNA burned into the steel of CVN-77. It is the spirit of resilience. It doesn't glide, it stomps. It doesn't hide in the shadows, it owns the horizon. This ship was not built for politicians, it was built for pilots. Its call sign is Avenger. It carries the spirit of a man who knows what it feels like to dive into anti-aircraft fire. But, while the soul is perfect, the body is broken. CVN-77 is the black sheep of the fleet. It is the 10th and final ship of the Nimitz class, but it is not a Nimitz, not really. It is a mutant. It is a transitional platform, caught between the proven engineering of the past and the experimental physics of the future Gerald R. Ford class. And like all experiments, it has a defect, a structural scar. CVN-77 fights a congenital list due to the radical displacement of the bulbous bow and the shifted island. The ship has a natural, permanent tendency to roll to starboard. So, how did the Navy fix this multi-billion-dollar drift? Did they redesign the hull? No, that was too expensive. They chose the brute force solution. They didn't just rely on pumping water. Fluid is unstable. Instead, they performed corrective surgery. Deep in the bowels of the ship, on the port side keel, engineers installed hundreds of tons of solid ballast. We are talking about massive blocks of dead weight, pig iron and lead, welded permanently into the voids. Think about the physics of that. To make the Bush effective, they had to intentionally make it heavier. They added parasitic mass. They anchored the port side down to stop the starboard side from rising. It is a linebacker wearing ankle weights to stay balanced. This is the heavy price of being a mutant. So, here is the thesis. Here is the question that defines the strategy of 2026. Why does the United States send a ship that lists to the right? Why send a Frankenstein vessel? one that drags dead iron through the water, to the most dangerous choke point on Earth. Because war is not a beauty pageant. When the stealth wears off and the runways are craters, you don't need perfection, you need vengeance. The Lincoln is there to pick the lock. The Bush is coming to kick the door down. To understand why the George H.W. Bush is the linchpin of this operation, we have to strip away the glamour of the F-35 and look at the gritty reality of sustainment. We have to analyze the triangle of destruction that the U.S. Navy is trying to build. First, let's drill deeper into the failure point of the F-15E Strike Eagle. Operation Agile Spartan relies on the concept of ACE, Agile Combat Employment. The theory is that you disperse your jets to small, rough airfields to avoid missile attacks. It sounds smart, but it is a logistical nightmare. An F-15E burns 30,000 pounds of fuel per mission. It drops 10 tons of ordnance. You cannot supply that kind of volume to a dozen scattered desert airstrips indefinitely. Eventually, the logistics chain snaps, and the moment the Iranian missile forces, the high-altitude wall, lock onto those coordinates, the land-based air power is neutralized. The hammer on the ground is glass. It breaks. Second, look at the limitations of the Abraham Lincoln. The Lincoln is operating in the stand-in role. Its primary weapon is the F-35C from VMF A314. This aircraft is designed to penetrate the Bavar 373 air defense network. To do that, it must be clean. No external fuel tanks, no external missiles. Everything is tucked inside the fuselage to maintain that microscopic radar cross-section. This creates a volume trap. The F-35 can kill a specific radar site. It can assassinate a specific command bunker, but it cannot wipe out an armored division. It cannot sink a swarm of 200 fast attack craft. It lacks the magazine depth. It is a sniper rifle. You don't use a sniper rifle to stop a riot. This is the gap. The U.S. Navy has the eyes, the Lincoln, and the power, the F-15, but they lack the sustainable mass. Enter the George H.W. Bush. This ship brings Carrier Air Wing 7, CVW-7, the heavy wing. Look at the flight deck of CVN-77. You will not see a single F-35C. You will see rows of FA-18EF Super Hornet, Block 3. To the amateur, this looks like a downgrade. Why use the old jet? To the strategist, this is the solution. Because the Lincoln is already in the theater providing stealth coverage, the Bush does not need to hide. The Super Hornets on CVN-77 operate in beast mode. They utilize every single external hardpoint on the wings. They are not carrying 2 bombs internally, they are carrying 10 bombs externally. They are flying with extended range fuel tanks. They are not snipers, they are dump trucks. They provide the volume of fire that the F-35 cannot. And most importantly, CVN-77 is the indestructible airfield. It runs on 2 Westinghouse A4W nuclear reactors. It moves at 30+ knots. It cannot be targeted by the pre-programmed ballistic missiles that threaten the F-15s in Qatar. It brings its own runway. It brings its own city. It is strategic redundancy. If the air bases burn, the Bush keeps launching. If the Lincoln runs out of stealth munitions, the Bush keeps hammering with conventional steel. The Pentagon is building a kill box. Lincoln is the eye. F-15 is the land hammer. Bush is the sea hammer. It is a triad. Remove one leg, and the structure falls. Add CVN-77, and you have a cage that the enemy cannot escape.